Hey there, ready for a deep dive into Plato?
Always up for a deep dive.
This guy's not just some dusty old philosopher, you know?
Oh, I know. His ideas still matter today, big time.
You really do. It's like he's still shaping how we think over 2,000 years later. We're diving into his world today, guided by excerpts from his Wikipedia page.
Sounds like a plan. Wikipedia, good starting point.
And let me tell you, there are some serious surprises in store, just wrapping my head around the fact that we have what's believed to be his entire body of work.
Oh, yeah. That's incredible, isn't it?
It's mind-blowing. Most of his contemporaries, we only have fragments.
Right. Just pieces of the puzzle.
But with Plato, we have it all. Dialogues, letters, the works. It's amazing.
It's wild. Like, we have this direct line to how he thought,
Yeah.
a window into his mind.
Totally. Okay, so let's start with Plato himself.
Right.
He was born in Athens around 428 BC, and get this, Plato wasn't even his real name.
Really?
Yeah. His real name was Aristocles.
Wow. Okay. Did not know that. Aristocles.
Makes you wonder why Plato...
Right. Why the nickname? I've heard a few things.
Oh, tell me.
Well, some say it's because of his physique. Plato comes from the Greek word for broad.
Huh. Like broad shoulders.
Yeah, exactly. But some say it referred to more than just his build, like maybe his wide range of knowledge or even his way with words.
Interesting. Adds to the whole mystique, right?
Totally.
And speaking of mystique, his life was full of it.
Oh, yeah.
He came from a wealthy, powerful Athenian family. They had ties to royalty even.
Wow, okay, he was connected.
And even a connection to the famed lawgiver, Solon.
No way. The Solon.
The one and only. Imagine that upbringing, surrounded by Athenian elite.
Yeah, I bet that had some influence.
Definitely shaped his thinking. No wonder he pondered big questions about justice and the ideal society.
Right. Those big questions.
But to understand those ideas, we've got to look at who influenced him. And one name immediately comes to mind, Socrates.
Of course, Socrates, Plato's teacher.
Yeah, and he's everywhere in Plato's writing, like a constant character.
It makes you wonder how much is actually Socrates, though. How much of it is Plato's interpretation of him?
It's a tricky one, right?
It's a big debate. The Socratic problem, they call it. It's tough to separate them. Like, for example, did Socrates truly believe in the virtue of ignorance? Or was that more of a Plato thing?
Yeah, like trying to separate two voices in a song.
Exactly.
Socrates wasn't his only influence, though, right?
Not even close.
Yeah.
Don't forget the Pythagoreans. The math geniuses with a mystical side.
Oh, yeah. The triangle people.
Exactly. They were convinced that this world, our physical world, was just a pale imitation.
An imitation of what?
Of a perfect world. A perfect mathematical realm.
Whoa, okay. Where everything is an equation.
In a way, yeah. That explains a lot about Plato's love for geometry, right?
That makes sense. It's like seeing the roots of his theory of forms.
Exactly.
But there's more to the story, right?
Oh, yeah.
We can't forget about Heraclitus and Parmenides. They had totally different views on reality.
Total opposite.
So Heraclitus, he was all about constant change.
Right. You can't step in the same river twice. That was Heraclitus.
Right. And Parmenides, he was more into permanent.
100%. Thought change was an illusion. Believed that deep down, reality was unchanging.
Okay, two very different viewpoints.
Complete opposites. But Plato was fascinated by both of them.
So he was already thinking about these big questions early on.
Oh, yeah, totally. Change versus permanence. What is reality, really?
The big stuff.
Those opposing views, they became a major tension in his thinking. He really tried to work through those contradictions.
So are you saying that his whole philosophical project was about reconciling those two extremes?
In a nutshell, yeah. And that leads us to, arguably, his most famous idea, the theory of forms.
Okay, I'll admit this is where I need things broken down a bit.
Sure.
It's a tricky one.
So imagine you see a table.
Okay, picturing a table.
Now imagine another table. They might be different, right? Different sizes, shapes, colors.
Right, different tables for different purposes.
But you still know they're both tables.
How? Because they have a flat surface and legs? I don't know.
Well, Plato would say it's because there's a form of tableness out there. A perfect, unchanging concept of a table.
Hold on. So there's like a blueprint for a table?
Kind of, yeah. A perfect concept that exists beyond any physical table we see in this world.
Okay. So the tables we see, they're just copies.
Imperfect copies
Yeah.
of this ideal form of tableness.
And this applies to everything?
Everything. Beauty, justice, truth. They all have their own forms, according to Plato. They exist in a separate realm.
A realm of perfect ideas. And we're stuck with the imitations.
That's the gist of it. And you know what he used as proof? Geometry.
Geometry, like
Yep.
shapes and angles.
Exactly. He thought those geometric truths, like the Pythagorean theorem, they pointed to these forms. Because of those relationships, they seem independent of any physical object,
So a perfect triangle exists somewhere out there.
in the realm of forms, at least according to Plato.
It's a lot to take in, but I have to admit it's kind of alluring.
Right. Makes you wonder what it would be like to see those perfect forms directly.
Like, would we even recognize them?
That's a good question. And it's a question that leads us to one of Plato's other big ideas, the immortality of the soul.
Wait, are we talking reincarnation here?
We are. He believed that before we're born, our souls, they exist in the realm of the forms.
Okay, so before we were born, we were hanging out with perfect tables and triangles.
Damn perfect justice and beauty and truth. But then we're born and boom, our souls, they forget all that knowledge.
A collective soul amnesia.
Exactly. So learning, it's not really about getting new information. It's more like remembering.
So deep down, we already know everything.
It's a pretty wild idea, right?
It is. Do you have a favorite example of this?
Well, there's the story of Socrates and the slave boy.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of this one.
It's in the Miprino dialogue.
Oh.
Socrates, he guides this uneducated slave boy through a geometry problem.
Okay, and what's the point?
The point is, even without any prior knowledge, the slave boy, he's able to access this innate understanding of geometry.
Because it's already in him, from the realm of forms.
Precisely. It's a pretty powerful illustration of his idea that knowledge isn't just about stuffing our brains with information, but about something deeper within us, something that connects to those eternal truths.
That's pretty profound. So it's more about uncovering what's already there.
You got it.
Okay, this is giving me a lot to think about, but let's bring it back down to earth for a second.
Back to reality.
Well, our reality anyway. How did these big ideas about forms and the soul, how did they influence his ideas about, society and how we should live?
Ah, good question. So, just as he saw the soul as having different parts,
Different parts. Like what?
he believed it was made up of reason, spirit, and appetite.
Okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. The number 3.
You're catching on.
So how does that play into society?
Well, he envisioned an ideal society split into 3 classes: the producers, the warriors, and the philosopher kings.
Producers, warriors, and philosopher kings. Okay, break that down for me.
So the producers, they're like the farmers, craftspeople, the builders.
The ones who keep things running.
Exactly. And they represent the appetite part of the soul.
The basic needs, the desires.
Right. Then you have the warriors. They defend the state, protect it. They're all about spirit, courage,
Makes sense. Strong and courageous.
Mm.
Okay, and the philosopher kings, those are the leaders, right?
The big thinkers.
Hmm.
Those who rule, guided by reason and wisdom. They're the ones who have glimpsed the forms, at least as much as is possible in this life.
So they're the wisest and therefore the most fit to lead.
That was Plato's argument. And he laid it all out in his famous work, The Republic. It's where he asks those big questions about justice.
What is justice? That's a big one.
It is. And for Plato, a just society wasn't just about having good laws.
It needed something more.
It needed a deep understanding of the good, of those higher truths, the ones represented by the forms.
Wow. So it's not enough to just have rules. People need a deeper understanding. But wasn't Plato a bit wary of things like art and poetry?
He had a complicated relationship with art, that's for sure, especially poetry.
Really? Because he was such a beautiful writer himself.
I know, right? He called poetry divine madness at one point.
Divine Magnus. So which is it? Is it good or bad?
That's the thing. He saw both sides of it. He loved its power, but also worried about it being used to manipulate people.
I can see that. Powerful art can really stay with you.
Exactly. He was worried it could lead people astray if it appealed to emotion over reason.
Because emotions can be so easily swayed.
Exactly.
But didn't he use stories and myths in his own work?
He did. Think about the allegory of the cave.
Oh, right. One of his most famous.
Such a powerful way to talk about the limits of human perception and the importance of seeking truth.
It's true. It's a story that stayed with me.
He knew how impactful stories could be, how they could make complex ideas stick.
It makes you wonder, if he was so worried about the power of storytelling, why use it himself?
That's the thing about Plato. Always keeping us on our toes. He was a master communicator.
He really was. Dialogues, treatises, captivating stories.
He knew how to make an impact. And that's part of what makes him so relevant, even today.
Yeah.
He knew that you have to meet people where they are, to truly understand the human experience. You need different approaches.
He really did cover it all, from the abstract realm of forms to practical concerns about politics and the power of storytelling.
It's incredible, isn't it? He was a true visionary.
Absolutely. But we've only just scratched the surface here.
There's so much more to uncover, like those unwritten doctrines.
Unwritten doctrines. Now you've got me hooked. What are those?
Oh, those unwritten doctrines. They're like a whole other side of Plato, a secret chapter almost.
Okay, now I'm even more curious. What do we actually know about them?
Well, it's tricky. It's like trying to put together a puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing.
And we're stuck with the mystery.
Right. We have to work with what we've got. And our main source, believe it or not, is Aristotle.
Aristotle, his own student.
The one and only. He talked about these secret teachings. Didn't give us a ton of detail, though.
So what did he say?
Well, some scholars think these doctrines, they dealt with the really big stuff. Even more fundamental than the forms.
Oh, bigger than the forms, that's saying something.
Right. Like maybe they were about identifying the good with the one.
The one, as in, like, the ultimate reality.
Yeah, exactly. The underlying principle of everything.
Wow. It's like he left these breadcrumbs, but we don't have the whole loaf. So these doctrines, have they had much of an impact?
Oh, absolutely. Think about Neoplatonism, that whole philosophical movement. They were heavily influenced by those mystical, metaphysical themes in the unwritten doctrines.
So even his secret teachings had a ripple effect.
It's like dropping a pebble in a pond, The ripples keep going.
And they're still being felt today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which just goes to show, philosophy, it's not some dusty old thing. It's a living conversation across the ages.
I love that. Speaking of conversations, what about Plato and rhetoric?
Rhetoric. Ah, the art of persuasion.
Yeah, he was concerned about poetry. I'm curious about what he thought about using language to convince people,
He had some thoughts on that, for sure. In Gorgias, one of the dialogues, he's pretty critical of rhetoric.
Gorgeous. One of the big ones. So what's he saying?
He basically paints it as a kind of flattery, something that can be used to manipulate people without any real knowledge.
Okay, so is it all about the speaker's intentions then? Like, a tool can be used for good or bad?
You hit the nail on the head. And later on, in Phaedrus, another dialogue, he actually offers a more balanced take.
Phaedrus, okay. How's that different?
Well, in this one, he says true rhetoric. It should be based on real knowledge and a deep understanding of, get this, the human soul.
Okay, so rhetoric as more than just fancy words.
Right. It's not about trickery. It's about using language to guide someone toward truth.
So he's grappling with the ethics of communication.
Exactly. And isn't that something we're still dealing with today? Big time.
Fake news, propaganda.
All of it. Plato was ahead of his time.
But for him, it always came back to knowledge, right?
Absolutely. True knowledge. And for Plato, that wasn't just about accumulating information. It was about something more. It was about living a good life, a virtuous life.
A life guided by reason. That's an idea that resonates even now.
It does, doesn't it? It makes you think, what kind of world do we want?
And what role does knowledge play in that world? What about Plato's own world? How did people react to his ideas back then?
Oh, his influence was huge. It went way beyond just philosophy.
Really? In what way?
Think about art, literature, even the way we structure governments, the way we approach science. He's had a hand in all of that.
That's amazing to think that his ideas, they're still with us.
They really are. I mean, he is considered one of the founders of Western philosophy after all.
He's a giant. But how did his ideas spread so far?
It's a fascinating story. For centuries, most people knew him through just one work, Timaeus. But then, after Constantinople fell in 1453,
Constantinople.
more of his original writings, they resurfaced. And that sparked a resurgence in interest during the Renaissance.
The Renaissance.
Yeah,
A rebirth of classical ideas. It all connects.
it does. And since then, he hasn't got out of style.
He's still the OG philosopher, but I'm sure he wasn't without his critics, right?
Oh, of course not. Every great thinker has their critics. Take Nietzsche, for example.
Nietzsche. God is dead, Nietzsche.
That's the one. Well, he was very much not on board with Plato's whole idea of the good. Thought it was life-denying, too idealistic.
Interesting. So, a difference in perspective. Anyone else?
Oh, yeah. Heidegger, another big name. He wasn't sold on the forms either.
What didn't he like about them?
He thought they created a separation between, thinking and being. Like, they were two different things.
So, each philosopher brought their own lens.
They did. And they all grappled with Plato in their own way.
Which makes you realize his ideas, they really were powerful.
They sparked debate. They inspired new ways of thinking.
He made people think.
That's the point of philosophy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I bet If Plato were here today, he'd be thrilled about that.
He'd be leading the debate.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, his dialogues, they're all about questioning, about challenging what we think we know.
It's about the search for truth. And he wants us to join in.
Exactly. Think for yourself. Don't just take his word for it. Figure out what you believe.
Test it out. Challenge it.
Exactly. Because that's how we grow.
That's how we learn.
And that's what makes studying philosophy so amazing. It's all about that deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
So, in a way, studying Plato, it's like having a conversation with him across the centuries.
That's a beautiful way to put it. We're all part of this ongoing dialogue.
It's a legacy that just keeps on giving. But we haven't talked about everything, have we?
We've barely scratched the surface.
What about Plato and his views on what makes us human? What makes us tick?
Ah, yes. What does it mean to be human? Well, Plato, he had an interesting definition.
Okay, I'm ready for this. Hit me with it.
He called humans featherless bipeds.
Featherless bipeds. That's it. That's all we are.
Well, it sounds simple.
Too simple.
And one philosopher agreed with you. Diogenes.
Diogenes. Wasn't he the one who lived in a barrel?
The very same. Known for, let's just say, his unique approach.
And for challenging Plato's definition?
Oh, he definitely did. And the most Diogenes way possible, in fact.
Hmm.
He decided to stage a philosophical prank.
A philosophical prank. Okay, you have to tell me everything. What did he do?
So picture this. Diogenes, he walks right into the academy.
Plato's academy, where all the big debates were happening.
Exactly. And he's carrying something.
Okay. What is it?
A plucked chicken.
He brought a chicken to the academy. What did he do with it?
He holds it up for everyone to see. All these great thinkers, probably deep in some philosophical discussion, and Diogenes just shouts, "Behold, I've brought you a man."
He called the chicken a man. That's amazing. What was he trying to prove?
He was basically calling out what he saw as a ridiculous definition.
By using a bird.
Hey, it worked. The point was, there's more to being human than just our physical bodies.
It's about what's inside.
Exactly.
So was Plato offended?
Who knows? But it's a great story, and it makes you think, what does it really mean to be human?
It's a question that's still relevant today. Are we just driven by biology, or is there something more?
And it's a question that Plato himself wrestled with. I mean, he knew we're complicated.
We're a mix of reason and emotions and desires.
Right. We're messy, contradictory.
And that's what makes us interesting.
And that's what Plato captures so well in his dialogues. The full spectrum of human experience.
It's all there. This
Yeah.
has been an incredible journey.
We've gone from those secret unwritten doctrines to a plucked chicken.
Only with Plato. It's like that chicken. It's a good reminder that there's more to us than meets the eye. Really.
Totally. And Plato, he was getting at that too. He just, maybe not with poultry.
Different time, different philosophical props.
Exactly. But this whole idea that there's something more to being human, it's everywhere in his work.
It feels like he's asking us to look deeper, beyond those simple definitions.
Because there's a mystery there, at the heart of what it means to be human.
And that's what makes his work so exciting to explore, even today. He wasn't afraid of the big questions.
And he never gave us easy answers either.
He wanted us to think, to challenge assumptions, to join him on that journey.
Exactly. And that's what we've been doing this whole deep dive. It's been a journey.
It really has. We started with his life, those mysterious early years.
Mystery man to philosophy.
Right. Then those incredible ideas about the forms, the soul, what makes a just society.
Even the power of stories. We covered a lot of ground.
And through it all, there's this theme of knowledge as more than just, facts and figures.
It's about living a good life.
Yeah.
A life guided by those big ideas.
It's a moral imperative, even.
Exactly. Knowledge isn't just for our heads. It's for our hearts, too.
It's how we become better humans. So where do we go from here? We've spent all this time with Plato. What's the next step in this philosophical journey?
The conversation doesn't end here. Pick up his dialogues. See what you think.
Wrestle with those ideas.
Exactly. Talk about it with others. See how it applies to your own life, to the world today.
Because these ideas matter, even after 2,000 years.
It's like he's still sparking these dialogues across time.
And we're all invited to join in.
We are. And who knows, maybe in our own way, we'll all find our own footnotes to add to this amazing philosophical tradition.
I love that image. Finding our own footnotes to Plato, it's inspiring. But before we go, I always like to leave our listeners with a little something to ponder. What's one question inspired by Plato that we can leave them with today?
Okay, how's this? If we really took Plato's idea to heart about this world being just a reflection, a shadow of that perfect realm of forms. What would that mean for how we see the world? For how we understand our own senses, even?
That's a great question. It makes you question everything you think you know. And that's the power of Plato. He challenges us to see things differently, even after all these years. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Plato. I hope you're walking away with new insights and, of course, a lot more questions. Until next time, keep seeking those eternal truths.
Thank you for listening. If you love history, don't forget to subscribe to History with Bree and Peter. Join us for more fascinating stories from the past. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode.